The Minnesota Vikings challenging in the NFC North. Very tough division as well. 3 teams in the playoff hunt. And the Vikings were fighting along with the Chicago Bears for a playoff spot. And here with me to talk about the Vikings season and everything that went on is David Kraus, a diehard Vikings fan. How are you doing today, David?
I'm doing excellent, Earl. How about yourself?
I am doing absolutely great, and I thank you for being a part of this. I definitely wanted to know, just being a Vikings fan, what led to you becoming a Vikings fan, and how long have you been one?
That's a question I get quite often here living in Pittsburgh. I've been a Vikings fan for about 26 years now. I'm sorry, about 24 years. I got into football heavily when I was about 10, 11 years old. So 1997 rolls around and I turned on the TV and the Vikings are playing. And what stood out to me was their uniforms. They were pretty catchy, and they had Randall Cunningham, who had come over a couple years prior from Philadelphia. And it was my first kind of watch of him. I really liked his play. He could run, he could throw bombs, and he was an efficient quarterback that was, kind of the quarterback that seemed to be missing for Minnesota. So I kind of started watching Minnesota at that point. And then 1998, the Vikings draft Randy Moss. And, I knew a little bit about his story coming out of Marshall and, the backstage things he had going on. And then I watched him on Thanksgiving versus Dallas that year. 3 receptions, 163 yards, and 3 touchdowns. 2 absolute bombs from Cunningham. And the third one was like a little hitch route to the left that he just took to the house. And, that kind of solidified my fandom as a Minnesota Viking fan. And I just ended up continued to root for them ever since then.
And especially being a Vikings fan, what has been one of the most memorable moments? I know they've had a few appearances in the NFC Championship game, but is it one of those or is it something else?
So there's a lot of memorable moments. Fortunately, probably more bad than good. But as far as memorable on the positive side, I'm going to go with 2 fairly recent ones. First one is the 2012 season of Adrian Peterson, the return from the ACL-MCL tear that he sustained the year before towards the end of the season. Everybody kind of said he was done. Even if he comes back, the way that he runs is not going to be efficient. And I had always liked Adrian, even at Oklahoma. So when the Vikings drafted him, it was like Christmas morning for me. And then to see him get hurt, and then see him come back, and not only come back at a high level, but to come back, best running back in the NFL, and to come rush for 2,097 yards, that's 6 yards a carry, 12 rushing touchdowns, carried that team into the playoffs, won the MVP, last non-quarterback to do so. And and that's when they had Christian Ponder, one of the absolute worst quarterbacks I've ever seen in my life for any team, not just Minnesota. That's probably one on my list. Number 2, obviously, I'm going to go with the Minneapolis Miracle just a few years back. The play is Buffalo right, 7 heaven. And Case Keenum calls it in the huddle. 3 receivers line up on the right. The center, hikes the ball, goes out. Adam Thielen's on the left-hand side, and you got Rudolph, Jet McKinnon, and Stefon Diggs on your right. And the ball, 10 seconds left. Minnesota's on their own 39. I don't think I have to explain the play. I think you know the play. Everybody knows the play. So Diggs catches the ball. It's a little high. Marcus Williams comes in, diving carelessly, runs into his teammate. Instead of running out of bounds to either end the game or with a second left for the kicker to come in, Diggs ends up stumbling and taking it to the house, throws off his helmet. And we got smashed the next week by Philly, but that moment just sticks out. We played the Saints well, and that I just absolutely lost it after that. Those are the 2 probably I'll go with.
Heading into the season, what were the expectations for the Vikings? I know very competitive division. I know, of course, there's always Green Bay, Chicago added Nick Foles, and Detroit's just Detroit. But what were you thinking about the Vikings' chances?
So, I looked at the schedule ahead of time, and I thought that 9 or 10 wins was easily a possibility. But at the same time, I knew the defense would struggle. Just so many offseason acquisitions and departures from last year. Linval Joseph, he's gone. Everson Griffin gone. And basically the entire secondary. Andrew Sendejo gone. Trey Wayne's gone, Mackenzie Alexander, J-Ron Curse, and then Danielle Hunter was already expected to miss at least the first 4 games of the season with his bicep injury. I didn't expect him to miss the whole season. Michael Pierce obviously opted out before the season even began when we brought him over from Baltimore. And then I didn't expect Eric Kendricks to miss the last 4 games, who was playing at an all-pro level. Mike Hughes, who was probably the best corner coming into the season, he's been on the shelf for 2 months. Taking those defensive things into consideration, Anthony Barr, I don't know if I mentioned him yet, but he got out for the season as well with an injury. But those losses up front were significant. And then, we go ahead and trade Ngakoue over the AFC to Baltimore. I knew it would be a struggle. But like I said, looking at the schedule, Chicago's offense didn't scare me. I thought that we could win 9 or 10 games, but everything that's happened at where we stand today, I'm not real surprised.
Was there a point you felt the team was going to the playoffs?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so we started 0-3, then beat Houston, had a lot of 1-point losses, Tennessee and Seattle, or the 2 that I think of from earlier in the season. But yeah, so I thought that we were headed to the playoffs when we won 5 of 6 before the Tampa Bay game. We had won 3 division games in a row, Green Bay, Detroit, Chicago, but then Dallas was the killer loss. Andy Dalton beats us with a throw with, just very little time left. But then you come back and you win the games you're supposed to win. Jacksonville, that was a win. Carolina was a win. And then Tampa Bay, I thought we outplayed them. Dan Bailey misses 3 extra points and 3 field goals. But yeah, it was at that point, when we had a 6 going into the Tampa Bay game that I felt pretty confident.
When was that turning point when you felt, okay, they're not making the playoffs?
So I want to say the Dallas game for sure. Atlanta, that was a big loss earlier in the year just because they were so bad. I think they were winless when they played us. But the Dallas and then obviously the Chicago, because we kind of controlled our own destiny. We still had a chance to make the playoffs. I know some things had to fall into place. Arizona had to lose the last 2, which ended up they actually lost a couple of days ago. And Chicago had to lose 1 of 2 as well. But even before the Chicago game, like I said, it was losing to Dallas when we were on that winning streak was really the heartbreaker, in my opinion.
Who did you feel that if the Vikings made the playoffs, they would have matched up well against in the NFC?
So you might laugh at this, but I'm going with the Saints for sure. Minnesota's 3-2 against the Saints, including the playoffs since 2017. And that includes the butt whooping that they just gave us on Christmas. But we always seem to play them well. Yeah, they put up 52, but we still scored 33 on them. And, for a Super Bowl contender, that defense, if they're giving up 30+, that's not going to be good enough. So, yeah, I was comfortable, like I said, Minneapolis Miracle, even going back to 2007 or 2008, rather, the playoffs, when Brett Favre was there. And, I thought the Bounty Gate game, we outplayed them. We go into overtime. We had that game won multiple times. So yeah, I was comfortable. I still feel that Drew Brees is not 100%. Feel like he's missing some arm strength, and Zimmer always seems to blitz him well. And I think that we would have probably, assuming we had some guys back, we would have caused them some problems.
Who do you felt that the Vikings would not have matched up well with?
So I'm thinking 2 teams. Seattle usually always plays us well, and it seems like they always have luck on their side in the playoffs. So that's one. And then I'm looking over at Tampa Bay, only because of, the juggernaut that they have offensively. Jones getting healthy now. And, obviously Tom Brady is Tom Brady. So with his pedigree, winning all those Super Bowl rings in the AFC, he's not the top priority as far as quarterbacks goes that I would want to see come playoff time.
Looking at Kirk Cousins, especially, he signed the contract a few years ago, I believe a 3-year deal. Really, really, really huge money. How do you sum up the Kirk Cousins experiment, and do you see him continuing in Minnesota?
So that's a good question I've gone back and forth with several times. I think one word would be underwhelming, but, I didn't have huge expectations with him to begin with. I thought that he was what he was in Washington. He's kind of like a Tony Romo, Matt Ryan, gunslinger type of guy that's going to get sacked. It's not going to step up and make the plays to win you championship games. I thought that Case Keenum, after the Minneapolis Miracle and after the Philly game in the NFC Championship, I thought that he had done enough in that one season to warrant another year coming back to Minnesota to start instead of shipping him off to Denver and then bringing in Cousins, with this crazy contract. But as far as your question on Cousins, he hasn't been horrible. I mean, you look at the stats this year, his interceptions are a little high. He's got 13 picks, but a lot of those are tipped passes from the receivers or just Hail Marys at the end of halves or towards the end of the game. It's not like, he's just throwing pick six after pick six. His numbers this year are actually very, very solid. 3,900 yards passing. He has 33 touchdowns. He has a very good completion percentage, and he has a just under 104 quarterback rating. Those are solid numbers, against some top teams. And, the offense in general, I have no problems with this year. But yeah, the offensive line's not perfect, but the receivers are, probably one of the best duos, if not the best duo in football. Cook is, probably the best all-purpose back right now in football. But yeah, and then to answer your other question, I think they'll probably try and draft and try to get some guys back healthy next year and see what Kirk can do. Maybe they draft like a quarterback third, fourth round and put some pressure on him, kind of like what Green Bay did with Jordan Love. But I think he's done enough to warrant another year in Minnesota and to try and get this team over the hump. But I do think both him and Zimmer are on the hot seat.
You were talking about the wide receiver core. So do you feel like the trade of Diggs was beneficial?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love Stefon Diggs. I'll always be a fan of his. I don't know what went on in the locker room in Minnesota or it seems like articles I read recently, he was just a little disappointed that, they seemed like Minnesota was a run-first team and, he could have had a lot better numbers than what he did. But it seems like Buffalo's a better fit for him. He's having a career year, obviously. But I think, Jefferson is equally good. And he's probably a better deep threat than Diggs is. And he has, I think, 70 receptions for, over a little bit over 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns with a game to go against Detroit here. So I think it was better for Minnesota because, they got that pick to draft him and they got younger. And, he's playing on a rookie contract. But like I said, I do miss Diggs and he'll always be remembered for the Minneapolis Miracle. And I'll always kind of root for him.
Looking at the prediction for the Super Bowl, who do you have coming out of the AFC? Who do you have coming out of the NFC? And what will the final score be?
So this won't be any surprise to you, but I'm going with Kansas City. I threw around Buffalo a couple times. I wouldn't be surprised if Buffalo can get there, but I just think, and Kansas City's defense, I'm not even crazy about. They have a couple of studs, Chris Jones and, the Honey Badger back there and decent linebackers. But, other than that, there's some vulnerability there defensively. But for teams to catch them offensively, you shut down Mahomes. I mean, you got Bell and Clyde Edwards, who's going to be coming back. And just too many receivers that have 4.2 speed. And then Kelsey's just unguardable. You shut down Kelsey. I mean, you got to have 3 guys back there with Hill. So I can't see any team that can keep up with him in the AFC offensively. So that's why I'm picking them. NFC is a little bit more of a challenge. I think most people are saying Green Bay or New Orleans, but I don't usually make beginning of the season predictions. Just too many things can happen. But I had actually made one this year, and I had said Kansas City over Seattle. Seattle, again, I'm not crazy about their pass rush or their defense in general. I think Jamal Adams, that has helped them a lot, though, in the secondary. And I think, Russell Wilson is other than maybe Rodgers, he's the NFC's Patrick Mahomes. And he's proven. He's done it in the playoffs before. Lockett, McCaff are legit receivers. David Moore is a good third option. They have good tight ends. They have Carlos Hyde and, Chris Carson and solid running backs. It's just going to be a tough offense for anybody to keep up with. So, with that said, I'm going Kansas City 34, Seattle 29. So I think it'll be a high-scoring game, and I think Kansas City will pull it out in the end.
What are some ways people can reach out to you on social media? Talk about the Vikings and really what they could do and need to do for next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always down to talking about football, especially my Vikings. I'm a big social media person, particularly on Facebook or Instagram. Facebook name is just David Kraus, and my Instagram name is Kraus Daddy, Kraus Daddy. I am on Twitter, although I'm not super active on there anymore. I kind of deleted the app off my phone just to kind of save space, and just because I wasn't real active. I do have a Twitter account as well, but Facebook and Instagram are my 2 main sources of social media.